with Ariane Gorin at the WiT Studio, President for Expedia for Business. So delighted to have you back in Singapore, Ariane.
It's such a pleasure to be here. It's been 4 years since I was last in Singapore.
4 years.
Yes.
So what have the first impressions been coming back?
It's a reminder of how vibrant and different things are in Asia. I live in London. I travel a lot to the US. But I think the words that come to mind, vibrant, alive. Already today I've met with 5 different partners from different countries in Asia. And, they've each developed in different ways during the pandemic. So I would say probably excitement for what's to come as things open up.
Right. And you're also here with some of your for some of the Expedia leadership, right? And so if you can share with us like what's on the agenda as Expedia builds back in Asia.
Yeah, so you're right. I'm here with a number of leaders from Expedia Group, and we're spending time with our team in Singapore in the office. We're doing all hands with all of our teams across Asia. And it's really, we're focused on, especially as some Asian markets open up, how do we make sure that we are strengthening our business here? That could be through our own brands. We have very strong brands across the region, from Japan down to Australia, by Korea, Singapore, and the like. But then also we power a lot of other companies in APAC. When we look at the sort of the travel market in Asia, there's more and more that happens outside of our own brands through partners in offline retail, in social, in corporate, and the like. National champion brands. And so how do we make sure that we're supporting their growth as best we can?
And that really became a breakout business during COVID for you in APAC, wasn't it? The sort of B2B white label business.
Yeah, well, I would say, as a company for Expedia Group, B2B has grown quite a bit over time. And in fact, that if you look at the way we report our earnings to investors now, we split out B2B from B2C. And APAC in particular is a strength for B2B. So I would say we've sort of grown that from a pretty small business back in 2014 to where it is now. And as I said, I've already spent the day-to-day meeting with a number of partners, and I know that our relationships still have a lot of room to grow.
You should have been in Singapore, I guess, 6 months ago, because it was a very different place, right? This weekend is like we have F1 and all the events, and there's a lot
That's why all the roads are closed.
Yes. There's a lot of revenge conferencing happening and revenge travel, so it's really an exciting time to be back in Asia, back in Singapore.
Completely.
But have you observed any differences, you think, in how APAC has developed in terms of customer behavior or business models to how they have developed in US and Europe?
Yeah, I think probably the number one top of mind thing for me is social. And how is social content and influencers developing in Asia? Obviously, Asia was always ahead on mobile. But again, in the few conversations I've had today, that's, what are we doing on TikTok? What are we doing on other social channels? How are we using video content to drive business, and creating communities has really been the thing that stood out the most.
Right. And do you feel that gap between the difference? APAC has always been different, and everybody says, it's very different, it's fragmented and all that. But do you feel that the difference between APAC and Western markets has widened because of the pandemic, because business had to go very local, and, there's been such accentuations of customer behavior in different markets?
Well, I don't know if I would say it's accentuated between APAC and Europe. What I have noticed is that because so many of the markets turned domestic, whereas in the past, even within Asia, there was a lot of sort of interconnectedness between countries and how business models developed. I think here you've seen over the last few years that it's been more country-level developments. So what's going to be fun to see is over the months to come as things open up, how does that ecosystem come back together?
Right. And actually this year too, Asia has been 2 worlds, right?
Yes.
So for the first part of the year, it was very much Southeast Asia recovery, and we were all waiting for North Asia. And now we got a second wave coming. So are you building back in APAC in terms of your talent, in terms of your business resources?
Certainly we are investing in APAC. I think you have a number of our leaders who are at the conference here today. And part of what I'm doing over the next few days is really understanding where is the growth going to come from, and therefore what investments or what choices do we have to make. And, to your question, if there was the first wave and the second wave, then the third wave is when China outbound comes back.
I'm so glad that we're using the word wave to talk about, travel recovery and not sort of COVID infections.
No, that's right. No, but it's true. It's become such a word that's just top of mind, but you're right. Better used in this context.
Right. At this conference, our theme is very much New World, right? And I want to come back to, and I'm going to read this because I can't remember it, but Jane Fonda, she recently revealed that she was having chemotherapy for her cancer. And then she basically said, we are living through the most consequential time in human history because what we do or don't do right now will determine what kind of future there will be. And do you think that we in travel are going through a very consequential time, post-pandemic, everything else?
For sure. I mean, I would start by saying we in the world are going through a consequential time. What Jane Fonda was referring to on the environment, on global warming and the like is undeniable. And so the question is, what can we do about it? When you look at what's happening with the war in Russia and Ukraine and the talk of potential nuclear weapons, like we are at a very consequential moment. And in some ways, I think that means the world has never needed the travel industry more. Because if you think about what the travel industry does is we create connections in real life. And I think connections, in-person connections, are the start of understanding other people, and I think of getting resolution and finding ways to address some of the biggest problems.
Of healing, right?
Of healing,
so
yes.
therefore, what must we in travel do now to determine the future that we will have?
Yeah. Well, I mean, from my small perch, what must we do? I mean, I think one thing is, as we build back travel, it needs to be sustainable, which we're still figuring out the path to. One of the big roles that we at Expedia can play is helping travelers get content and understand the sort of the impact of their choices. And I think as an industry, we're still figuring out how do we get that data in a way that's not self-reported, that can actually be relied on. I think we also need to think about inclusion. How do we make travel more inclusive? So for underserved populations who might have accessibility needs or underserved LGBTQ, like other populations that need to be brought into travel, I think as we come back from a period of lower demand to higher demand, how do we make sure it's inclusive?
Right, and how do we not so get overwhelmed now by the travel recovery, and then all we focus in is the short term, right?
Exactly.
And it was interesting at the conference, there was definitely a lot of soul searching and quite honest, like saying we don't have the answers, but we're all having to figure this out together. Yeah. But importantly is that what must we not do?
Yeah. Well, I think what you've just said, which is let's not focus on the short term instead of the long term. Let's not just be, going for growth rather than travel or experience. I've spoken to a lot of partners over the last year that have had to make tough choices about occupancy, for example. They've said, look, I could run my hotel at 100% occupancy, but I wouldn't be able to give the level of service that my travelers are demanding, especially with high ADRs. And so they've said, you know what, I'm making the tough decision to say I'm going to run at partial capacity, but keep the service levels. So I think that we have to not forget that there's a traveler at the center of all of this and that we're here to give them great experiences.
Right. So, I also asked the audience for a word cloud, what words come to mind, when I say New World. So we're going to end on that note. What words come to mind when I say, hello, New World?
I think of a sunrise. Every day starts with a sunrise. So I think of the sun rising. I think about green shoots sort of flowering up. So I think about nature.
Oh, how lovely, So you must actually leave your mark on our art piece over there. We've got an Indonesian artist here, Pucuk Masriadi, and she's creating a piece of art themed Hello New World with your contribution. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Singapore. And I hope we don't have to wait 4 more years before we see you again.
For sure not. Definitely not.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.